Alright guys, so today we're going to cover something on the channel that I honestly just don't feel like we cover enough. Now I've been covering some IEMs lately, but a lot of them have been a little high price. But today we're going to check out a budget friendly pair of IEMs, which is the TinHiFi C3 Mark IIs or MK2s. They're budget because they only come in at around $50, and I actually think there's a lot about this pair that you guys might be interested in. So the first thing, let's just go ahead and check out some of the things that come inside the box, which I do want to point out is a very generic looking box. It's just white with just some black print on the outside. It's very simple, but inside the box, you are also getting a pretty generic hard case. In fact, I think on Amazon, I've seen this case for like action cams. There's no branding of any kind on the outside. When you open it up, you can see TinHiFi on the little pouch. The pouch will allow you to house the silicone ear tips that it comes with, because it does come with 6 different pairs. It also comes with 2 extra sets of the little nozzle filters. So if you notice over time they start to get a little dirty or gunked up or something like that, you can switch them out. They do have these extra ones in the box, which is nice. And then the cable that it comes with, I'm actually a fan of. It is a pretty thin cable. It doesn't feel like anything that's like super expensive, but it is an oxygen-free copper silver plated cable. It is using the 2-pin connection, and it does have the 3.5mm connection to plug into whatever you're using, which is a standard jack. It doesn't come with a balanced adapter or a 1/4-inch plug-in, so you are going to have to use those if your amp or whatever device you're plugging them into requires that. But if you are interested, they also have a Type-C connection, which we obviously know at this point everything's kind of gone to Type-C. But I have the 3.5mm connection. This allows me some more flexibility with the amps and the DACs that I use. But just know that that option is out there, and I'll have all of this linked in the description. But let's go ahead and move over to the IEMs themselves. The design of these overall, it's pretty simple. It's pretty much black overall. You can see the TinHiFi is in gold with some stars kind of around it on the outside. It is very tiny. It is using a 3D resin. It's very smooth. This is a very comfortable pair to wear. It's one of those that's easy to just kind of throw in your ears. You can kind of leave them in all day, and at some point you just kind of forget that they're there. There's not a lot of weight here. There's nothing that feels like it's pulling. You're using a 10mm dynamic driver. They are using an LCP diaphragm or liquid crystal polymer diaphragm. It also shows the components on the back of the packaging. One thing that I actually thought was pretty interesting, it says the N52 high sex energy. Don't know why they used that wording there, but they didn't use it on their listing on Amazon or their website or anything like that. But on the packaging, it actually says that. But the impedance level on these is only 32 ohms. It's very easy to drive these, so you don't necessarily need a DAC or an amp to really get decent volume out of these. It has a frequency range of 10 hertz to 40 kilohertz. And I think now's probably a good time to just go ahead and jump into the sound. Now, I did use the Moon River 3 that I recently reviewed a lot of the time while testing these, but I also use the FIO K11, which is my main amp that I use at my desktop. And I can say that the sound actually kind of surprised me on these. I was kind of expecting something a little overly boosted. I wasn't expecting what I got, which was something that was pretty close to a very balanced sound. It does do a pretty good job of pulling out sub bass, but it's still controlled to a certain point. It's not like overly bloated, it's not congested, it's not muddy or anything like that at all. It's actually pretty fast, but you can feel a little bit of impact. I do feel like with the mids, they kind of tried to boost them a little bit, but this is definitely not one of those like super forward mids. I felt like with male and female vocalists, I had no issues getting characteristics pulled out of that. And the treble is also kind of interesting because it was very detailed, but it was still very smooth. It wasn't like overly bright, it wasn't overly harsh, it wasn't dull. Again, I felt like they were doing a pretty good job to try to keep these pretty balanced overall. And when I say that, I don't mean neutral. I know that can sometimes be very confusing. It's not neutral as trying to go for something very flat. But when I say balanced, it feels like the lows, the mids, and the highs are all kind of working together to be a little bit dynamic, but not overly dynamic. So again, it feels pretty well controlled, but the soundstage and the sound imaging on these, I would say, is kind of like in the middle. It's not one of those that sounds like overly wide. It doesn't give you that like concert hall type feel, but it doesn't isolate you to feel like you're in a closet listening to music either. I would say it kind of makes you feel like you're in a small to medium sized room, so don't expect anything like grand here. And with that, I will say it does a pretty good job for gaming. It's not as detailed as some of the more expensive IEMs as far as giving you, again, this wide open space and the very good awareness of where everything was coming from. It does do a pretty decent job with that with music, but again, it just doesn't feel as open when it comes to gaming. If you're going to compare them to those. But again, it's kind of hard to compare a $50 IEM to a pair that's $200 to $300 and $1,000 like one of the pairs that we've checked out recently. So from a budget standpoint, you're getting a lot here. I think from a sound standpoint, it punches well above its weight in that $50 price range. There are a lot of cheap IEMs or inexpensive IEMs or budget IEMs, whatever you want to call them. So it's a pretty competitive market, but TinHiFi, in my experience, has always done a really good job of making you feel like you're getting a lot for your money. And although some of the accessories, like the case, just kind of seems generic, the cable isn't anything fantastic. It does get tangled a little easily, but it looks good. It matches very well with the looks of the IEM itself. It doesn't look like a cheap pair of IEMs. It doesn't sound like a cheap pair of IEMs. And I actually highly recommend these, especially being able to get them for around $50. And again, if you are interested, I will have it linked in the description. But guys, that wraps up my video on the TinHiFi C3 Mark IIs. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Thank you so much for checking out all the other videos. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for more.